I'm going to talk about Tsisqan Lodge, Grandfather Lodge of the Pacific Northwest, and kind of our top 10 best pieces, collectible pieces. For the presentation, I'm kind of keeping it to flaps, neckerchiefs, stuff that was actually issued by the lodge. There is a Caldwell pin that is associated with the lodge. I did not include that in this presentation because that pin was uh, not specifically or created by the lodge. So that's why that didn't get in here, but it is a very nice, valuable piece nonetheless. Yeah, Tsisqan Lodge, we were founded in 1944. We're we really were started in 1943 when several members of the camp staff, summer camp staff, decided they wanted to have an honor camping society in our area too. And at the time, the camp director, who was also one of the professionals, his name is Judd Compton. He was from a lodge, I think in the Chicago area, but Illinois area, came out and he talked a lot about the OA and got the individuals excited. So in March, we were officially chartered. Um, Same day as our council was officially chartered, Oregon Trail Council. Um, we were the first lodge in the Oregon, Washington, Idaho area. One of the things they did after they got started was they started going out and creating other lodges. Colsnass out of the Salem area, Mazama, Maquala down in our southern Oregon, and then they went into Washington and helped create lodges in Washington. That's how we kind of came up, started getting called the Grandfather Lodge later on in the 70s and 80s, um, because so many of the lodges in our region directly tied to us here. Currently, about 245 members. There are next year. The council merged tomorrow with Crater Lake to create Pacific Crest Council. So the youth will get together and they've got about a year to figure out what we're going to become in that time frame. I added a picture of our Camp Malakwa here. It's our kind of our high adventure camp. It's a camp where there's no electricity, there's running water from pumps that we've created. But the reason I'm adding this specific picture, this is from our council campfire area, and it looks towards the Three Sisters. And there's a lot of our patches kind of inspired by this view. And so that I wanted to share that with you so that that comes from somewhere. It's actually a beautiful area. If you ever can get out in Oregon in the summer, contact me. We'll get you up there because it is an amazing camp. And so from there, number 10 is our S1. Um, in the blue book, it has it as the S1 or the S1B based on the sizes. There's a 113 millimeter variation or 117 millimeter variation. It's we we figure it was produced late 50s, probably 1958 time frame. This is the image. Tsisqan means running deer. So they created this running deer. It looks like all those traffic signs when you're driving, the deer warning signs, except there's an arrow added to it. And as you can see back there, there's the Three Sisters. In the background, the lake and the mountains. So that's you'll notice on a lot of the Tsisqan stuff, this is our base design for particularly our early patches, and some of them maybe our more mid 1990s patches. And then number 9 is our S2. So when I was kind of going through this, I reached out to a bunch of different people, and these are kind of flopped in that some people will go, the S2 is a little easier than the S1. I kind of just put it in this order, and I decided the S2 was a little harder than the S1 only because of the mountains. If you look in this patch, the pink mountains are almost white, but they are pink. You have to look at it pretty close to notice that there is a shade difference. And people can kind of gloss over that and miss that. That's why I went with this is just maybe a little bit more difficult than the S1. And then our number 8 patch is for top of the top 10 is our 25th anniversary. It's our S7. This patch was issued in 1969 at our lodge banquet at the Eugene Hotel in Eugene, Oregon at the time. This was a hard patch to find for a long time. It was kind of the gem. They're starting to show up quite a bit more. That's why kind of slid on the list. You can find these. I know someone that has five of them. So I'm not that person. I have that one that you see the image of, but they're out there. So they're getting more available as time goes on. And then for our next patch is our S17. The S17 was issued in 1988. This was for the longest time. Tsisqan is a restricted lodge, so we had two flaps. We had a restricted flap, and then we had a trader flap. And our trader flap was just a black background, brown deer, red arrow on it, Tsisqan and white lettering. Um, Nothing too fancy, but it was like that from the mid 1960s until 1988 when we decided to redesign the patch to this sunburst design. And so this patch was issued. There was only 100 of them made, and it was a double issue of, hey, let's come celebrate the fact that we have a new trader flap out, and come to annual fellowship. Right? We call them annual meetings at that. And the first 100 people through the door are going to get this patch. So only 100 of them were made. Uh, they are pretty hard to find. A lot of people that have them still have kept on them. Every once in a while, they go $100 in auctions, 5 to 600 in the last auction I saw of some of the local people. Now, national auctions is probably gonna be a little bit less. On the deer is on this series, the S18, which is the regular flat. The deer, we call it the anorexic deer. It's kind of the inside joke on it. And then we asked the patch company to fatten it up. And then when they came out with the next one, um, the deer is a lot fatter. So the inside kind of joke was it was a pregnant deer. So you can kind of see those differences on them there. And then coming up, we're going back to our 1960s era patches. This is our S3. This is a very hard patch to get. Um, the thing that kind of distinguishes from the S4s is the vertical stitching of the lake and sky. They're very hard to see when they go into auction. They go crazy for them. I've only seen one come up in the auction in probably the last 25 years. There are some out there, but a good mint condition one is hard to find. So this is definitely a great find if you can find it. And it's got a cut edge. Let's see, that's about the big keys on that one. Our next one, the X3. The kind of the funny thing about this one, when I joined the OA in 1985, these were around everywhere. Um, they were pretty common. You could find these. And I don't think a lot of people understood what they represented. And it took some research and some talking to some people. And what it was is the OA had their own week at Camp Malakwa in the summer. It's for OA members only. They'd come up, do service. They would have outbound hikes to the sisters. It was just a fun service slash fellowship week in camp. And this was issued to those that attended and staffed that week. And it's a segment that actually goes around the council patch on the uniform. Um, Now you can't find these. They're gone. They get a when they come in, and I've seen people try to get them. They're costing some money for some people to pay. So they're from just in 30 years, 35 years, you can't find them. And where I feel like when I first joined, these were everywhere. These were kind of in people's junk drawers, and I think that might be why it's gotten hard now to find these, um, as people have gotten rid of stuff. So our fourth number four here is one of those ones that personally drives me nuts. It's a self-imposed rarity. The lodge back in 2006 timeframe, the officers decided um, they wanted to get attendance up at our annual fellowship, and they thought the way to do that was do a series of patches over the next 4 or 5 years, and you'd get a new one with a different border. And then, but they needed the money up front we're a small lodge, so the decision was let's put them all in a nice packet, and then we'll have this patch, and we'll only make 25 of them, and then we'll sell the sets together. Uh, 25. Uh, I want to say we charged $250 for the set. Um, and then they reached out to some of the key people. They snatched up really quick. These sets do not come up. The people that have them are they're the Tsisqan collectors, and they're not releasing these. So it's probably the hardest one of the hardest patches to get overall. If you're a hardcore Tsisqan collector, it's gonna be one of the last patches you can get, and you're gonna have to wait till one of the long-term collectors of the lodge is willing to start liquidating their collection. Um, I It drives me nuts because I don't like these self-imposed rarities, but I understood what the youth were doing. I was actually on a deployment when that all went down um, with the army at the time. Someone took care of me, made sure I was able to get one when I was gone. So I do have a set, but they were able to pay for the set, and even the base design, the six flaps for those years, it just changed border. There's a blue, there's a green, there's a yellow, there's a gold border one, and each one was given to anybody that attended annual fellowship for those years. And then we're going to move into kind of a neckerchief. We're moving out of the flaps, so that 25th, the one of 20, the 25 patches is actually the toughest patch to get. Now we're going to kind of move into a neckerchief here real quick. And this was a service neckerchief. It was issued only to the chapter service vice chiefs and a couple key service adults from the lodge service officer, vice chief, and that was in 1986. So there were about 6 to 10 of these made. Very tough piece to get. It's it's one that I don't have, and I probably got maybe the second or third most complete collection for Chiskin. Very tough to get. It's ironic. My best friend's the one that issued these, and he still hasn't given me one. I don't think he has any more, so I got to keep working on him on that. And then the number two item, next toughest item to get in the lodge, is our X1. And the blue book had it as the X 0.5. For the longest time, especially through the 80s and 90s, we didn't know this existed. Remember the long time collector lodge. No clue this was a tricycle issue. Uh, I gave a little picture on here to make us know that it was a tricycle issue, or even scouting. And then a few years ago, I want to say probably about 10 years ago, some members kind of started reconnecting from the 50s. And they had one of these and brought the story of how this came about. And it was kind of like, well, what's the provenance of it? And they were able to produce one of our old deer tracks, which is our newsletter that showed this in the design. It talks about at the 1956 event, you could come and get this felt W with the leaping deer sewn onto it. So I know of about three out there. There's probably a few more. Um, Very, very hard to get. You're spending money for this. It's a piece I don't have. I don't have that kind of money. Um, but it's a beautiful piece when you see it. I've the One of the members he brings it to our annual fellowship and it's displayed there, and it's a very nice piece looking. I can see where a lot of people wouldn't know what they have. Even I wouldn't be shocked if this was sitting in some antique store in one of those high school Letterman junk stores. Uh, I think probably is there, but very tough piece. Every once in a while, it come up, but like I said, I know about three of them. So our last really tough piece that I'm going to talk about for the lodge is our YP1. And the reason I put this as number one is the toughest piece in the lodge is there's only one. So it kind of defaulted down to that. For the longest time, it was actually located in the museum in Las Vegas. And the museum got located for West Virginia. A collector in Washington was able to get it, but he eventually did sell it to one of our members, so we do consider it kind of back into the lodge. Um, one of our members has it. He actually, I would say, has the complete Tsisqan collection. He's done a very good job of getting stuff. He has that Caldwell pin. He has all those neckerchiefs and stuff that I've shown and patches. And with so we do have a display where you can roll out for a lot of our history with the patches. This patches kind of depicts um, what would be you would see on our neckerchiefs now, except our triangles don't have white deers; they have a brown or a black deer, or dark red deer sometimes, and the lettering is white. So that's the difference from what our current neckerchief pie-shaped patches look like to this patch. I actually like this patch. I think it's a beautiful patch. I kind of wish they had issued this one, and um, instead of it being just a one-off. But I do have a few honorable mentions. We have some rarities out there that there's quite a few of them, but they still don't come up very often. So I just want to talk briefly about our honorable mentions. And our first honorable mention I want to talk about is our QS3, which is very similar to our S14. The difference is our lodge really, when they got forced to put the fleur de lis on everything, they always wanted it ghosted. It was kind of their act of defiance back in the late 70s, early 80s. And it's actually kind of been our tradition since. We tend to want the fleur de lis always ghosted. So when these came out with the white fleur de lis, they didn't want that. So what they were doing at that annual meeting when you were buying it is they were handing you a black Sharpie and making you color patch. So like the S14, when you see those pop up, if you turn to the back, you can see the white fleur de lis. There are a few that got out that people didn't color. So it is a hard patch to get. There's probably maybe out of the over 500, maybe like five that didn't get colored. Very hard to find, but a great piece when you do find it um, because it wasn't altered. The other one is the YP2. These didn't weren't known for a long time. Popped up a few years ago. Several of them like all popped up at the same time and came out of some collections of individuals from the 1960s. And what it is it looks exactly like our P4, which would have white Chiskin 253 and WW. These have a pink. The stitching is very obviously pink. It's not a color fade from the ribbon from our neckerchiefs. Our neckerchiefs are all white with a red ribbon, 1 bar for ordeal, 2 bars for brotherhood. And they tend to kind of come under the patch. So you can clearly see that those ribbons don't touch any of this to alter the patch. I've seen 4 or 5 since I first saw this one. So they've been popping up. We don't know how many were made. The assumption is that it was a thread error by the manufacturer's part because um, I know of people from the 70s that didn't even know that this existed. So um, that's our first round of honorable mention. Our next one are these are lodge. The next 4 kind of neckerchiefs that were issued by lodge advisors. Um, with the exception of the name neckerchiefs all of our in our program. And they were given a neckerchief. Lean were given shirts in the 80s to distinguish themselves. And so they started doing a neckerchief for the knee mats. So it was just screen printed by the Alingamat advisor at the time. Um, so they were only available between basically 1984, 87. And it kind of went away from practice of using them. That advisor moved to out of state. So I think we lost the screen print, which is probably why that happened. Um, Great piece if you can find them. There are not a lot of these floating around either. Um, they might start popping up again as some of the 1980s maybe reconnect as their kids or grandkids get older. Um, yeah, I haven't seen one come up for auction for quite a while, so I honestly couldn't tell you a value on it. Um, And then the next one is the N3. We had an advisor who was very good with a screen printer, and he made it was silk screen, excuse me. And he made this neckerchief. It was all black fabric with a white ribbon sewn on it, and then this screen print. That was his award to adults and officers while he was the advisor from 1979 to 1982. And then during our 50th anniversary in 1994, he came back and he had a stack of them. So he gave every member of the 50th committee one of these patches. So it was dual issued, I guess, for the lack of a better term. They pop up. You've seen them out there. But they don't say Tsisqan anywhere. So a lot of people that aren't kind of Pacific Northwest savvy that maybe haven't won't know what lodge it's associated with, per se. So that's why it can be kind of a difficult one if you don't understand the lodge's history and memorabilia to find. Um, and then the next group is so that same advisor I was talking about from 79 to 82, 1981, when we went to the Alingamat program as a lodge, he made this neckerchief. The picture doesn't show it very well, and I'm sorry about that, but it's kind of an aqua fabric. So it's kind of a weirdish green blue fabric. And then the Lingmat's got this. Not very many of them out there. He just recently passed last year, and he had a few extras in his collection. So there's been a few that have kind of been able to fill some of the people's collections in the area recently. And then in five, the advisor in 2016, it was me. I will be honest, I issued this one and it was to all the officers and adult leaders. There were only about 50 of these made. Um, it's a tough piece. Everybody that got one is for the most part kept it. There you just don't see these pop out very often. I don't have any extras, so I pretty much made exactly how many I issued out. So, but it's a nice piece. It's something different. When I was advisor, I always tried to do something different every year for someone and for the officers and the adults. And this was the 2016 edition. And then the lastly for the honorable mentions is the YS1. This is our trader flat from about 2005 to 2010. So the deer is actually supposed to be brown. And there's a few that got out. We don't know how. We don't. The whoever was selling training posts never caught it. We actually didn't figure it out until the national jamboree when someone showed it to a couple of us. We're like, "Hey, when did you go to a black deer?" And we were all like, "Whoa, we didn't know that." Um, we're guessing that maybe just one sleeve of the 500 order, so maybe 25 got out there. I've seen about 10 total throughout the lodge members at the time. So it's a tough piece to get. I wouldn't know a value on it because I haven't seen anybody trying to sell theirs yet. The podcast was their shape one. It was a issue in 1989. The reason why this is kind of a tougher piece is we only made 150 of them. And back when we issued them, they were kind of expensive. I want to say we were charging $15, which now doesn't sound like much, but back then that was kind of a shock. We'd never charged more than $2 for a patch in the lodge. And they weren't selling super great. They were keeping off the bat, and then we were able to sell off the other 75. And he lives in Maryland somewhere, and he's been sitting on them. And slowly, every once in a while, he'll pop one out because they are a hard piece to get. They do come up. I've seen them. I didn't check eBay yesterday. There might even be one on eBay right now. There was for quite a while there. He has a big price on it. Um, but it is a nice piece. It's a very nice patch the lodge has issued. And just another one of those tough ones to get. And that's kind of the top pieces in Tsisqan. I did mention that we are merging next year, but this is our 80th anniversary. So before I shoot the questions or anything, we are going to issue an 80th anniversary set, which is going to consist of the flap there, which is kind of a take of the of our trader flaps from the 60s, 70s. But the difference is ghosted will be the mountains from our camp. You'll get a banquet and a banquet patch, and then the other patch as well. The anniversary that we're going to celebrate is coming up at our annual fellowship, which is October 18th, 20. If you're out in Oregon that time, hey, feel free to get on our website, Tsisqan.org, and register. We'd love to see you there. The lodge advisor is on this presentation, so I'm making a pitch so that he gets some people out there. And when I know more about what the organization kind of I'll make sure to get those notes out to everybody what that's going to look like. And any questions?
Let me ask you this. I've known that your lodge has maintained its collectorate for a long time. What have y'all done to keep not only good OA service, but consistently popular patch collecting? Because when someone says, oh yeah, we've got to get that patch from those guys that still have it from 40 years ago, we're just glad to see anybody show up from 40 years ago. So what do y'all owe this this to?
It's a great question. And I think one of the things that Tsisqan as a lodge is really good at is instilling that camaraderie. We still, I mean, there's a couple people on here that were youth officers when I was a youth officer, and we still come to events. We've really bought into what the meaning of the lodge is and what the OA is, and and come back constantly to give back to our council and instill that camaraderie and that fellowship in the lodge. And we do a really good job when kids kind of age out. We try to bring them back in, maybe not as advisors, but there's a small group that will do maintenance at the camps, and we bring those kids in and like, hey, come with us, and we kind of mentor them through their 20s, and a lot of them stick around and become chapter advisors eventually, and lodge advisors like myself. And it, and I also kind of say I'd be remiss if I didn't say that our advisors of the 70s and 80s really kind of instilled that servant leadership in us, and really reinforced that you always can give something to the lodge and the council and your community, and just made you feel like you were special when you came to these events.
On S1, S2, and S3, to the best of your knowledge or what you've heard, how are those flaps restricted?
So the S1, I'm not 100% sure that the S1 and the S2 were restricted. I know they went to a restriction in the 60s, and it was one per honor. And that's how we kind of still do it. Yeah, and then they were really tough. I know back in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a lot of peer pressure about people patch trading. It wasn't really looked upon positively in the lodge at the time, based on some conversations that I've had with people that were around that time, particularly with the lodge flat. So the kind of the pushback from the people that were getting into the collecting and going to jamborees and stuff was like, well, if we can't trade this one, let's make one that we can trade. So that's where our trader flaps came out. And those were not, to my knowledge, not limited on how many they could buy or anything like that. But the restricteds were one per honor.
Oh, okay. So you sort of backed in there a little bit. So the fact that you had a trading flap, is it a fair thing to say that even though the S1 and S2 may have preceded the one per honor restriction, that the lodge actually had what we call a no trade restriction on those?
I would say that's a fair comment. Yeah, absolutely. Based on what I have been told about the pressure and the peer pressure about people trading off the lodge flaps. Yeah.
And then maybe the one per honor restriction kind of kicked in around the time that the vertical stitched S3 came along. Is that possible?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah.
In that
That's about the
timeframe.
time with our
All right.
yeah.
I think, okay, the second question I have, which is my last for now, is, so you have the silver mylar cut edge flap with the yellow inner border, which I know you're familiar with. Okay.
Yeah, that's
It's the
one of our
version of the
rejected flaps.
anniversary one.
Mhm.
And I know you came along into the OA. You said you got in about 1985.
85. Mhm.
All right. So, whatever the deal is with that flap preceded you, but I'm sure you heard the story along the way, or there is a story that the lodge today considers to kind of be that story. So what is that story?
Yeah, they didn't like the design of it. And I got a graph over here that I can kind of just um and they sent it back to the patch company. And then I think it was the yellow. Yeah, they didn't like the yellow inner border, if I remember right. And then so they sent it back to the patch company. And then that patch company started sending it out as samples. When companies were like, "Hey, we want to create a patch," they'd send them those, and so they're out there. There's quite a few of them. You can find them. I see them every once in a while. Um, and so that's how I was told. They just didn't like the look of the yellow inner border.
Yeah.
Cut
So
edge.
that was kind of why they went with it. And Joe,
So
do you have anything to add?
And that cut edge on that one isn't as sharp as the final product, the rounded edge on the 25th.
Yeah,
That's the major difference that I've seen, being
yeah.
one of minor of the people who are on here of chasing collectors.
Oh,
Yeah.
so in the world of cataloging for both Joe and Chris, so how do you categorize that patch? Do you categorize
That
it as a
is,
Z? Do you categorize it as a Q?
it's
How do you
categorized as a
categorize it?
Q. It's our QS1.
That is your QS1, is that yellow
Yes.
inner border job.
Yes,
And to
sir.
the best of
Yeah.
your knowledge, 100% of that order was returned to the manufacturer, as
Yes.
far as you know. You guys have heard.
Yes.